Hi, this is Candice Paine for BizNews, and I'm sitting with Paul Semple, who is the portfolio manager of Futuregrowth's Power Debt Fund, a very interesting initiative that almost works hand in hand with government around renewables. Paul, tell us a little bit more around what you're actually doing.
Candice, thank you. I'm working for Futuregrowth managing the Power Debt Fund, which is a fairly new fund. It was launched just over 3 years ago when Futuregrowth foresaw the growing opportunity in the renewable power sector. And we were really fortunate to get involved early on, and we invested over 2 billion rand in the first round of renewable deals that came on stream almost 3 years ago.
What actually constitutes renewable energy?
Renewable energy is a collective term for a number of renewable technologies, predominantly solar powered technology as well as wind power, but it also includes biomass and small hydro technologies.
And what is the South African government's commitment to growing renewables?
Well, yeah, South Africa has identified that we're a resource-rich country for renewable energy, and the government has identified a target of approximately 18,000 megawatts of electricity to be procured from renewables by the year 2030.
What does that make up as a percentage of the energy that we require?
Yeah, so that makes up about 40% of all new energy that will be procured between now and then, and probably around 30% of the total energy mix.
That's quite significant and should be a good assistant to Eskom's current problems.
Absolutely. I think the procurement of renewable energy has come at exactly the right time, because it has been procured very quickly, and it's been very efficient and cost effective, and it's provided electricity to the grid at a time when really the government is scrambling around to find sources of power, which in many cases take years to build.
So we're saying that this renewable energy has had some impact on the drawdown in load shedding recently.
Absolutely, I really believe it has. Over the last 6 to 12 months, approximately 2,000 megawatts of new power have come onto the grid from renewable projects. And this, I believe, has greatly helped to alleviate the pressures on the grid.
For the layman, what does 2,000 megawatts of electricity mean? What does that actually drive? So,
in terms of households, that's approximately 350,000 households.
Wow.
But in the bigger picture, where we are running on between 30 and 40,000 megawatts of power, 2,000 over the last year or so has been a great help.
So how do the deals actually get structured? Who are the stakeholders? What are their roles? How do they participate? What does Futuregrowth do in the process?
So the program has really been backed by the international community and international developers that have come into South Africa. The program is great in the sense that there's a minimum local equity contribution or requirement. So all of these projects have to meet that requirement. And then there's also a large debt requirement, of which most of that has been provided by South African institutions. Futuregrowth being one of the leading institutions, particularly in the institutional space. The commercial banks have provided a large amount of the debt, but Futuregrowth has committed over 7 billion rands worth of debt commitments to 23 projects to date. and the 23 projects make up around 30% of the total projects that have been awarded contracts by the government to date.
So that's quite a material commitment from the private sector. Is this one of the private-public partnerships that really are working within the context of South Africa?
Yeah, it's been a tremendous success, Candice. So to date, almost 200 billion rands worth of investment has gone into renewable power, of which the private sector has probably introduced about 120 billion. So it's been a very, very successful partnership.
And what does that mean for the communities around which these projects are kind of built?
The communities have benefited. Firstly, part of the contract with between government and the projects is a requirement that they invest in the communities in which the projects are located. So apart from the jobs that have been created and the additional skills that have been transferred, there's been a large requirement on projects to invest back into the community, so building infrastructure which will support the community in which they reside.
And I imagine that many of the communities are in, let's call it, geographically difficult areas, so you're actually taking employment and social upliftment into areas that may not have been obvious in the first place.
Absolutely. So the majority of the renewable projects are located in rural areas, and there's been a lot of job creation, mainly through the construction phase of these projects. But having said that, there is an ongoing requirement for jobs, for employment by these projects to maintain them. And you know, these rural areas have attracted more and more investment. So the skills that have been passed on through the development phase of these projects, those same people can use those skills in other projects that are springing up in those areas.
Okay, and it probably also serves to keep people in rural communities rather than this kind of urban drift.
Absolutely.
Which helps with the social structure.
It certainly does.
Okay, so they're wonderful spin-offs from these kind of projects. Just let's talk from Eskom's point of view. So Eskom is committed to buying the energy from these projects and putting them back onto the grid. What kind of rates do they agree to, and how are those things set?
So Eskom has entered into 20-year power purchase agreements with these projects. So they will buy all the power that's produced over the next 20 years at a set tariff. At this point in time, the tariff has come screaming down and is actually below the costs that Eskom would pay for an equivalent unit of power from coal projects. So, for example, a wind project, Eskom would be paying around 65 odd cents per unit of power, versus just under R1 for the same unit of power from a coal-fired plant.
Okay, and those prices, those tariffs are obviously built into the cost of the project and kind of involved in your due diligence when you're looking at the project from the outset.
That's absolutely correct, yeah. So the projects will use that revenue from Eskom to pay down the debt that they've borrowed from the likes of Futuregrowth.
And these projects obviously form the base of the investments in your power debt fund. Let's just talk a little bit about the returns of your fund. How have these projects contributed to that?
Yeah, so these projects have been great in the sense that they are long-term investments, and they've got inflationary-linked returns, okay, because the tariffs that Eskom pay are inflationary linked. So they meet the mandate of the fund, which is a long-term investment, and also the tangible social and developmental impact that these projects have also meet the mandate of the fund.
Okay, so the fund is exceeding its benchmarks on all levels.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So Paul, who would be the investors in your fund? Where does the money come from to fund these projects?
Candice, the money that is used is from our pension fund clients.
Paul Semple, Portfolio Manager for the Futuregrowth Power Debt Fund. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Candice.